Well, hey everyone, I'm Richard Gaspard, House of Worship Market Manager for PreSonus, and today we are talking to Dan Wathen, who's the executive producer for Cooke Media Group. Dan and I go way back to about 1994, 1995. And so anyway, Dan, it's good to have you. Why don't you let us know what it is that you do for Cooke Media Group?
Thank you, Rich. Good to be here. And yeah, we do go way back to the good old days. My official title is Executive Producer with Cooke Media Group. And we provide production services, consulting, and branding for churches and nonprofits. So we work with a wide range of clients, helping mega churches, and we even have produced presidential TV ads. So it spans the gamut. Kind of our unofficial slogan is we help Christians not suck at the media. So we'll always be in business for a while.
What a worthy goal.
That's right.
And you also were like a church media director, church media pastor at a few churches, kind of mostly in the South. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've worked in 3 different churches, most of which I was the media director of large churches, and those particular churches also had television broadcast. We were balancing church life and church content as well as broadcast content.
Right.
And then I moved to Hollywood, and when I first moved out here for a couple of years, I worked in film distribution and also for some reality show development companies. I worked with the lady for a while that developed The Bachelor, and that was her show. And so we were brainstorming on new shows to develop, which most of those don't ever go anywhere. They're just ideas that you pitch around, and very few of them actually live. So
yeah. So that's where, Dan and I, for those of you watching, Dan and I, we both served on church staffs as a media director when I was there in Lafayette, Louisiana, at the church that I was on staff at for about 14 years. Dan was just like 2 hours down the road from me. He was near Beaumont, and then a little bit further down the road in Victoria, Texas. Is that right? And so we served together at Oral Roberts Television. Dan's a proud graduate of Oral Roberts University. I was on faculty at ORU while I served at Oral Roberts Television, and did a lot of live television together, thousands of hours of it. And
literally,
I would love to say that the headset chatter always stayed professional and serious, but I don't know that I can make that honest claim. It was good times. We kind of honed our craft at the same time. He in the video world, me in the audio world, and it's been good. We've been able to stay in touch all these years, and so I'm excited about what you guys watching are going to get to glean from Dan, because again, he does this for a living. He helps churches achieve their goals in the area of media, and what a great resource. What I mean? Obviously, this is not anything that's done for free, but today you're going to get to experience and learn from him for free. And so, I've been wanting to have him be a part of this discussion for a while, and so it's my honor to be able to host you, Dan, and kind of discuss some of the stuff of what's happening in church media. So let's just kind of talk about, we'll dive right into this, about the state of what's happening in the church right now. And obviously, the thing that's on everyone's mind is this COVID-19 situation. Before COVID, streaming was an afterthought. Some churches were doing it, but now that's completely changed. So tell me, what's been your experience since all of this, or even before this? What's been your experience as far as that goes?
It's funny. Probably a few months ago, maybe a year ago, some of the clients we work with, the good-sized churches, or maybe streaming, but yet they just didn't know if they should put it on Facebook or do Facebook Live. They just felt yeah, we probably don't want to do that. They can come to our website. That's enough. So live streaming, like you said, was a second thought. It was an extension of the service. We're not necessarily going to change what we do on Sunday to accommodate or even to acknowledge these people that are watching, because we don't want them to maybe not show up for church. That was a fear of a lot of pastors, is that if I go live, then my congregation's not going to come to church. I always like to compare it to, think of your favorite restaurant that you like to go to, you like to eat at. Are there ever times that you want to do takeout instead of going and sitting down? Especially nowadays, we're all doing that. But think about it. Just because you go get takeout, does that mean you're never ever going to visit that establishment again and sit down and eat it? Probably not. It's still a better experience actually being in there. I laughed the other day, I got takeout, and it seems like every time I take out from one of my favorite restaurants, it's not as good. It looks like smaller portions. I'm used to my bigger plate. It's probably all psychological. But, for the most part, we're not seeing that it's stealing from church members, but it's actually helping churches grow. And we've seen that since COVID. We've been forced to have to look at that. The churches that weren't streaming have suddenly come on board. I forget what the stat was. I think it was around 60% of churches pre-COVID were streaming. And now you're either 100% or you're not in tune with your congregation at all. And so we've seen a huge spike. In fact, Life Church, that provides the free church online platform, the week of COVID, they saw 4.6 million users of their platform that Sunday, that first Sunday. And it's much higher now. So it's really interesting. In fact, the church is producing more content than Hollywood is right now. I live in Hollywood in LA, and it's not far from me. I could be at Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, Disney, and those lots are empty. I drove by there the other day. There's nothing going on. Most of my friends that work in this industry in town are unemployed and they're not working. So, but if you work in the church, you're probably the busiest you've been right now. This is like high Christmas or Easter season for you guys, because you're not only live streaming or pre-taping your Sunday service, you're probably doing other content with your pastor throughout the week, maybe small groups. Maybe you're even having to help out with the children's department, editing audio, and doing production for that for YouTube. So we're seeing all sorts of new things being invented, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, even in my experience, the church I served at, I do all of their post production audio mixing, and we're doing a children's elementary service that's pre-taped each week. I'm going to mix this weekend's ones coming up tonight, as from the day we're taping this. They do a preschool and elementary service. They do the youth service online. We were fortunate enough that we were doing streaming on Sundays, and so we're still doing that live. And then they're rebroadcasting. But it's definitely been the church media tech's time to shine. Lots of pastors and church committees that didn't see the importance of this, all of a sudden see this as it's gone from being an afterthought or something that you can do to something that you must do. And I can attest from that. I can attest to that from the manufacturer standpoint. At PreSonus, we're sold out of every interface. And we've got dealers calling us, when you got more stuff coming in, and it's a balancing act to not allocate out all new product to just one or two big box places. You're trying to make sure that everybody's going to have a chance. So other manufacturers are all sold out on interfaces as well. We've just really in this short amount of time, just become experts at doing this. And when I was on staff at the church, we had a local television show. We were on TV. We were on a couple of different stations, and we spent several hours a week working on the TV show based off of pre-produced content. The band featuring, we featured the band, we featured, pieces that we would produce, and commercials, and then, the message and stuff. And I was tracking viewership and attendance after having seen the television show and all newcomers, and I saw a steady decline. By the time I left the church's full-time employment in 2016, we had gone from about 20% having seen the television show before coming to church to about 7. And since then, like around mid 2015, early 2016, they just got off the air. But with this going on, you have seen a resurgence of churches getting back on television. You want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Richard, it's huge actually. Just this morning I got up and a buddy of mine that is a worship leader at a church in Colorado was frantically messaging me on Facebook saying our church just bought airtime on the CBS station for Sunday, and he had a captioning question. So they've never been on TV before, but they're realizing that there's huge value in purchasing airtime in your local market, because that's your audience. That's your church. Those are potential visitors to your church, people that would maybe even never go to your website. But this is the taste that they can see that your church isn't weird. You're not, you don't have snakes in your church. You're not snake handling. Nothing strange is going on. It's actually a cool, normal experience. And this is your time to share that with your community and to also share what you're doing for the community. Lots of churches are doing, whether it's food giveaways, masks, are doing outreaches into the community, and show that and let the community know what you're doing. It shows that you're a part, and that you have your pulse on what's going on. But yeah, we're working with several churches that have either temporarily, at least for a month, purchased airtime in their local, and it's usually one of the big 3 or 4 stations, CBS, NBC, ABC, or Fox. And you'll find on Sunday mornings, there usually is availability before the Sunday morning talk shows hit, the news shows. And these aren't that expensive, for, in some cases, depending on where you live, it could be a few $100 to larger markets, maybe $1,000, but that's not bad for the amount of people that you're reaching. And targeting that for a month. And in some cases, some clients we're working with are going on for a year. They're making this a full-time deal because they realize there's a good chance we're not going back to how it was before. Things have changed. And, a lot of elderly people are saying they're not comfortable going back into the church environment. So they're either going to stay watching online or on television. So we need to really rethink our platforms and be open to looking at maybe mediums that we thought were outdated. But yet television is still on the rise, and it's still the central platform in people's homes that they watch content for.
I was thinking, it's a perfect opportunity for churches to take advantage of broadcast, because we've got a lot of businesses that have had to cut back. And, perhaps they've cut back on their media budget. Perhaps they've cut back on their advertising that they're spending. They're not doing television commercials. And I know here in my local area, they are doing more kind of promo-based stuff. They're saying, thank you for watching during this difficult time. This segment is brought to you by. I mean, that basically tells me that business isn't spending money on production anymore. They're just getting a mention, which means that the TV stations themselves are hurting because they don't have all those ad dollars rolling in. So it might be the perfect opportunity for some paid programming slots. That's what we did. We buy a 28-minute, 30-second slot. We were on the NBC cable affiliate right after Saturday Night Live. We also were on the Fox affiliate midnight on Friday nights, and I'd go eat lunch with my pastor around town, and he'd get recognized, and he would immediately just tell people, "You're up too late." But this, I was just thinking, that, I mean, this could be just a perfect opportunity to seize the moment. and I don't want to say take advantage, because we're not really taking advantage of anyone, but taking advantage of the opportunity that, as demand um, goes down, that cost may very well go down. And this might
Mhm.
be a great opportunity for churches to be able to, to buy some airtime.
And
But
look at
you're
it this
right.
way: you're already doing the production uh, for your Sunday services, whether you're live or pre-tapes. You're already shooting it and most likely recording it and capturing it. So there's not a whole lot more work on the back end to make that into a show. Just some touch it up with graphics and adjust the time a bit. But the bulk, probably more than 50% of the show is done. So you're kind of ahead of the game, and that you're not having to start from scratch. You've already got a huge part, 75% of your show ready to go.
Yeah. Which, I heard a statistic a couple of months ago. You know, uh, as far as, we see bands and folks doing internet streams, and they're streaming their band and everything. I heard this statistic a couple of months ago, that there are 19,000, roughly 19,000 performance venues in the United States where
Wow.
bands can perform, where bands can get up and showcase their talent. There's 350,000 churches. And
Wow.
so his point was,
That's in the United States or
United
worldwide?
States, 350,000 churches
Wow.
in the United States. So, you know, the way that he mentioned it to me is opportunity for musicians.
Yeah.
And so it's the perfect opportunity. I mean, we have so much more music happening, so much more content that's happening. Again, you just said it. Hollywood's not producing anything, but
Hmm.
churches are. And so, it's this could be an opportunity for all of that content, for all of those things that are, I mean, we call it worship. A
Hmm.
secular, venue would be calling it a performance, but whatever the genre may be, the content that's happening on the stage, to be able to present that. I mean, there is so much more that is still happening in the church world.
Yeah.
Even there was so much that was happening there versus the secular venues to begin with. And yeah, I just think it's a great.
Church, yeah, churches are amazing. I mean, Rich, I started out as a teenager learning media in my home church in Tulsa. I was a little kid that was interested in it and got lucky, and they allowed me to start learning how to run cameras, directing, editing as a kid, because in no other place could you get that hands-on equipment.
Yeah,
No, you can't walk into a TV station with no experience and say, let me play on your cameras and learn. You're not going to get it. The church, with the audio equipment that's in churches these days, with live and post, I tell people, take advantage of that, learn. This
yeah,
could become a career. You don't necessarily have to go to college to do what we do, even though I did, but you don't have to do it.
yeah,
Take advantage of what the church has to offer by serving the church, and you're going to learn a great skill.
yeah. I had a graphic artist who worked for me for about 4 years, and he originally was a pre-med major.
Mm.
Went Left the college environment for a couple of years, went to a Bible school, and then went back to college. And he was like a broadcast journalism major or video production or something. But he was working with me as a volunteer on the weekend. He was one of my camera operators. My
Yeah.
camera guys were paid at the time, but he was doing some video production and stuff with us. And he was doing a lot of graphic design for my department. And he went and talked to his advisor, and he was telling his advisor like all the stuff he was doing at the church. And his advisor literally said, "You're doing more stuff right now at your church than seniors graduating are doing here
No,
in
I
a
believe it.
classroom setting." So his own advisor advised him to go get another major. And
Hmm.
so Chris actually got a degree in marketing. He just completely went a different direction. And he's a quite successful photographer, graphic design guy in New Orleans now. And I mean, he credits this the time that he spent at church,
Hmm.
working in the media department, volunteering, honing those skills there. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. The opportunities to be involved and to build that skill, that can be a blessing and source of income outside of that.
Absolutely.
It's great. And certainly now the need for folks to be able to do that has increased, because it's becoming more and more the video venue where, we need camera operators, we need
Sure.
directors, we need guys who can do broadcast mix live, or even, post-production mixing, depending on the way the church is doing their production. But yeah, man.
And one thing too that I will just, anybody that's listening to keep in mind, a mistake, and it was probably lack of maturity when I started as a teen and even into my 20s. I always saw my work in the church or with ministries as a stepping stone to get out of that type of thing, to say, well, I'll learn in the church, but I'm going to Hollywood. That's my goal. And over the years, I've realized, no, God actually was calling me to work in that space, not to leave it. We actually need good, talented people to stay around. And so, as if you're listening today and you're working in the church, see this as your calling. There's nothing wrong in that. There's no shame in that. There's value in that. Own it, and really let God use you where you're at today. And you never know what could happen in the future.
Yeah, and with that said, sometimes there are things that are seasonal.
Mhm.
My decade and a half working full time in a church was a season. I don't know that I ever see myself going back there full time, going back into the church full time. But
Mhm.
my role at PreSonus is resourcing the church market. So I work at a secular company now, but my job is to take care of ministry
Mhm.
in
Very cool.
terms of their audio needs, with respect to PreSonus gear and the customer service side and all, and support and all of that. So yeah, it really can take on a lot of forms. I mean, you yourself were, served in several churches. You're not working for a church now. I know you volunteer at your church, but your job is similar to mine in that you work for a business, and part of that business takes care of stuff that's happening in the technical arts of ministry.
Right.
And
And just like when we worked together, Rich, in Tulsa, I always saw that as kind of our hardcore training ground. Wasn't always easy. Uh, they demanded perfection, and you know, I know I made a ton of mistakes I still, when I go to do them today, I realize, oh no, I got in trouble for doing that. There's no way. So I think I'm glad for those experiences early on that have made me who I am today and see the things that we see today. Just like you at PreSonus, you're an amazing guy. God's got you right there for this season. And anyone listening, listen to Rich. He's a wealth of knowledge. He knows his stuff. And it's been cool to see how you've come from the audio side, working in live production churches, even moved into video. You understand both worlds really well.
yeah, it's definitely been, a cool journey. And I mean, anyone watching who has an interest, I would say, man, that feel like that field's just about to open up, because
Mhm.
we're really seeing the validity of it all. And
Mhm.
with people in leadership in ministry seeing that validity, it's going to have to get staffed somehow.
Yeah.
And if you're already plugged in, and it's a skill that you have, that could be a real opportunity for you. So kind of shifting gears here, what I mean, do you feel like as things open up, I know you kind of alluded to this, you feel like, obviously we're going to go back to churches, we're going to go back to church, we're going to go back to public gatherings and everything, but you really feel like streaming and broadcast is going to continue? It's the future.
I think for some pastors, they're naturally going to feel, oh, I'm finally in my comfort zone again when the doors open up. My seats are filled. And it's going to be easy to forget where we've been, or we forget that there is that live audience that's still watching online. So I think it's important that we don't forget this, and we do not forget those viewers, because some of them may not ever come back to our church physically, or they may not come as much, and that's okay. Uh, as someone put it, I heard that church is an people can access church through multiple different ways. They can, whether it's online, in your service. When Home Depot first started offering online sales years ago, a lot of the store owners complained because people weren't physically coming into the stores to make purchases, and they were complaining to management, hey, stop doing this. But they found that people that went online were actually spending a longer time looking around and actually purchased more online. And then they would come into the store to pick it up. So they didn't lose money, they were gaining money. It was just funneled in different ways. And so the same with church. Yeah, you may not physically see as many people in your seats. However, you could actually be gaining more people watching you than before, and including more people giving. There's 2 churches right now that we work with that their giving's actually spiked during this time. It's not gone down. So that's a sign to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think all those things point to the fact that, the online presence, you and I have known it all along. It's a legit audience. It's a legit presence. And it's not only, and I know some pastors may bristle at this idea, but I mean, I watch lots of other churches online, and so I support my local body. My wife and I do give to other ministries, but,
Mm-hmm.
I support my local body that way. But, this kind of thing gives the opportunity for folks to reach a broader audience. I was literally on the phone with a guy yesterday. He's at a church in the Dallas area, smaller church, and they're looking to get some new speakers from us. And he and I were talking and about what they needed to do. And he sent me a picture of their auditorium from like the sound engineer's position in front of house
Yeah.
where the mixer sits. And I said, dude, your your room looks so different from back there than what it does on your online thing. And he's like, you watch our stuff online? I'm like, yeah, man, you put, I watched you lead worship just a couple weeks ago, and I said, your stage looks a lot bigger, shot closer up and all of that.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, I'm checking out people who are on our, our Facebook page, other Facebook pages that I follow. I mean, I'm watching bits and pieces of a lot of different services, so I know that I'm not alone in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a way for you to just reach so much wider of an audience. I mean, you mentioned the whole Life Church thing. I mean, Life Church is a church with all of their campuses, what, maybe 30, 40,000 people, 50,000 people, but they're
Yeah.
getting 4 million hits. Is that what you said?
Well, the Church Online platform is a
Oh,
plug-in
right,
that
yeah,
they give to churches.
right,
So with all the churches that have downloaded that,
right.
there was over 4.6 million
Okay, I
watching,
got you. Yeah,
which is
my
pretty.
church actually uses the church
Yeah.
platform. Okay, so
But look at your church as almost a TV network, if you want to put it in those terms of, hey, you have this 24-hour, 7-day-a-week availability online to do whatever you want with. You're not limited to just Sundays, just Saturday night services. This could be, you could literally program your week out with different stuff,
yeah.
different content from youth, kids, small groups, prayer sessions. The sky's the limit. So there's a lot to work with there, really, as much as time is your only enemy at that point.
Yeah. So with that said, I mean, a lot of churches, larger venues were doing, the image magnification stuff on screen. I know my church does
Mhm.
that, and they actually do 2 different feeds, an IMAG feed, IMAG meaning image magnification, and
Mhm.
then a broadcast feed. Um, what are some of the things from a video standpoint, and I'll talk a little bit about the audio standpoint, but from a video standpoint, what are things that are different for the broadcast realm versus the IMAG or just the archival, purposes? What makes a good broadcast on the video side?
As a video producer, director, I always ask myself, who's the end audience for this? Is it the people in the auditorium, which would be your IMAG, image magnification. So if I'm sitting in the back of the room, I can look at a screen and see a tight shot of pastor. I'm not going to want to see wide shots because I'm sitting in the back of the room and I see a wide shot already. So the end user there is the person in the audience. If I'm live streaming, the in person is probably on a mobile device, iPhone, iPad. Maybe they're streaming it or throwing it to their big screen TV, but most likely it's a smaller device. So maybe in worship, I'm using some wide shots, occasional wide shots for the message, but I'm maybe cutting around a bit more. I see a tight shot of pastor, a medium shot, a head to toe shot, some side shots. And for broadcast, that keeps extending. We want to immediately establish the room. Let's see that wide shot. Because of COVID, we're not doing wide shots. We're not showing empty audiences. Don't shoot an empty space. But you can do a wider shot of the stage or a head to toe shot. But keep the shots moving. Just picture yourself, if you were in there as a viewer sitting in a chair, would your eyes be glued to your pastor never moving for 45 minutes? Probably not. What are you going to do? You're going to be looking around, taking in a wider shot, occasionally a medium shot. So as a director and a video director, we are doing the same thing for the viewers that aren't in that room. We're giving them that same natural pacing of shot changes.
Right. So on the audio end, I like what you said about thinking about the end user, and then you mentioned the room, the
Right.
interviewer, and you mentioned the room. For the audio guy, I always, and I say this all the time when I'm mixing for television or mixing for film, I do an occasional, mixing job for people doing video pieces. I always say my mantra for that is it has to sound like it looks. And
Good.
so in a broadcast audio scenario, if I've got a room that's clearly several hundred or more, I don't want to hear, to me, it's weird if I'm hearing just his microphone and he sounds super up close to me. I would, if you're doing a streaming mix and, what you want to do is add a couple of audience mics into that. Now, when you've got audience there, I mean, you get the audience response if you got an amen crowd or applause or laughter, and you can sneak that into the mix. Like if the pastor tells a joke, it's coming up. If it's funny, you you sneak the you sneak the laughter in and then back down. You don't want him to sound too ambient, but the audience is part of what you are seeing. Now, I know here in our post-COVID life, we're not doing the crowd shots, but still you can tell by looking at something if you're in a big room or not. So there's no shame in adding just a little bit of reverb to the pastor's lob or something like that, just to give it a little bit of a sense of space. Another thing on the audio side, a lot of churches are finding this out quickly, immediately, the hard way. A broadcast mix is not the same as your PA mix. The way I define things is a PA mix is actually taking things that were quiet acoustically in the room and making them louder to match the things that were louder in the room. So the classic example is a drum set. The drums are loud acoustically. So when you hear the PA mix in a vacuum, there's not much drums in it. So you're listening to something that doesn't have any drums in it, but there's a drummer on stage. So it's backwards. So a broadcast mix is best. I'm not saying that you have to do this, and I want to emphasize at this point, and I think Dan would agree with me, we don't want you to feel like you got to go spend $1 million to do something. We want you to do things as best as you can with what you have. If you don't have budget to create another mixer, you can always take an aux mix, what's called a post fader aux mix, and do some tweaking of the main mix of what's going to broadcast. But the broadcast mix is almost opposite of what the PA mix sounds like in isolation, because in the broadcast world, you're starting off in a vacuum which is what the person at home or on their phone or wherever they are is hearing. They're hearing that in a vacuum. They're not in the room, so they're not hearing the loud drum set and the other things added to it. They're hearing everything coming from, the little speaker here or their computer speakers. So on the mix side of things, you're creating that room for them in where they are. And so lots of online tutorials about how to do a broadcast mix. We actually have a lot of them there. It wasn't my intent for this interview to get too much into the weeds of how-tos. We were just kind of talking more about, the heart and some of the whys behind it. But just suffice it to say, on the video side, you've got to create that experience where the person feels like they're in the room, and it's the same thing on the audio side.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because new clients we work with, especially if they're new to the online world or broadcast world, that's usually the one thing we see is they do not have audience response mics hung to catch that.
Yeah.
And in the TV world, the live stream world, there's nothing more odd and strange than the pastor saying, "Give the Lord a good clap." You cut to a wide shot, you see people clapping, and you hear like one person on the front row
bleeding,
or his lob.
Through his, yeah.
Or I have the opposite problem. Maybe they've got great audience response, but the director isn't cutting to show the people clapping. So we hear these people, but we don't see them. So audio and video have got to, they're one thing that work together. So that's crucial. So,
one of the things I used to tell my guys when I was doing this full time, I would tell all of my camera operators, just go watch a bunch of television. And at the time, I always told them, for music, Saturday Night Live.
Mm-hmm.
For interviews and just quick camera response to somebody doing something on stage, David Letterman. Because those guys, just the top of the game. And, Letterman would make a move, the camera guy would pull out and get his hand and, whatever. And the same thing, Saturday Night Live, the mix on those songs for Saturday Night Live is always dead on. They have an amazing room there at the NBC studios, but then also the camera work and just how it's all cut together. I don't know that I've seen anything recently that touches those two shows of how those things do that. And obviously in the church world, there's the Elevation and the Church on the Move and Life Church, as you mentioned, Fellowship Church, all the big ones.
Yeah.
And those guys rival that production value. They're great. So lots of other things that you can look at and listen to for ideas of what to do. And you don't have to have a $50,000 mixer to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
You can do that with what you have. Obviously, if you're interested, I'll put a plug in here for PreSonus. If you're interested in purchasing anything at any given moment, we will obviously service that. So let's.
But there's a huge difference between a person in your auditorium during worship service, what they're hearing there, versus them watching at home on their computer. You can't use that same mix, like you were saying. Yeah. It's going to sound terrible. Our viewers are used to hearing the best of the best. They can pull up and listen to Hillsong. It's beautiful. Yeah. Sounds great. People are used to that. So when they start hearing something that isn't that, they're either not going to stick around or they're going to come back after worship.
Yeah.
So it's important that we try to make it the best we can.
Yeah, you brought up Hillsong. My oldest daughter went to Hillsong College for 3 years, and so I've been to Hillsong 3 times, and I've been to the church 3 times, and you hear their records, and it's amazing. You hear their records, and then you go to a live service there. The worship leaders, the singers, sing it a little bit differently. They might be a little more energetic in the live service, but the band plays those tunes exactly like the originals. But what you're hearing is live records that were recorded with those musicians and those singers in that room through that mixer into a recording deal and then remixed. And then you go sit in the room and it's crazy. It sounds exactly like the record.
Really?
Because
Wow.
it's their guys in that
Wow.
room through that. And so I've not, I mean, obviously that's the only real way to hear a true representation of what a live record sounds like in the thing would be churches. Because I mean,
Hmm.
I mean, if a band does a live concert somewhere and they record it, you're never going to hear it sound like that because it won't be in the
Right.
venue or anything. So it was just interesting, while we're kind of
That's
on
cool.
the subject about the room and the experience.
Hmm.
If you ever get the chance to go to Hillsong, I mean, I'm sure it's the same way with Elevation and those other
Yeah.
guys at Bethel, because you're hearing that record recorded in that room, and that room becomes
Hmm.
part of that sound. And the other thing, kind of building on what you talked about being in the room and everything, is really about engagement. And we need to build video presentations and audio presentations that let you experience that engagement, and the production isn't hindering the engagement happening.
Right.
So, like what I was saying a while ago, if the pastor is in a room that's obviously 500 to 800 people or more, it's weird if all we hear is just his love without any
Exactly.
room. And those little things, they're subtle and they're not at the forefront of people's minds as they're watching it.
Hmm.
The average Joe isn't going to go, well, that sounds awfully present for a microphone in a room that size. But
Right.
but psychologically, there's a disconnect. And
Hmm.
so if we can remove those disconnects, then that presentation becomes more authentic from a production side. So anything that we can do to create that moment of engagement, I think is a good thing.
It's really good. Very true.
So another thing that I wanted to ask you about, um, so guys who are watching this, men and women who are watching this, who a good bit of them are going to be media volunteers, but we're going to have a good bit of folks who watch this who are in leadership in some form or another, specifically in the worship or technical arts.
Hmm.
And they're in charge of a volunteer staff. I, for one, had about 40 volunteers and contract people that I was in charge of over my department. You know, Obviously, I mean, I was at a big church. Sometimes people, it might be you're over like 4 people, and that's your
Hmm.
crew, or you got 3 guys, whatever. What would you say to someone specifically who's in leadership in this time of what we're going through, to just keep their volunteers motivated, or just keep the last thing that I would like to see people do is go, well, COVID's happening and we got to maintain, we just got to hold the fort.
Right.
Why not think about, even though this is going on, let's move forward, let's keep pushing. What would you
Hmm.
say to someone in that position, coming from your experience and what you did?
Yeah. Volunteers are probably your biggest asset if you think about it. I've worked in multiple churches. It's one of the toughest jobs is to manage volunteers, and it's one of the most rewarding, but it's not easy. You go through busy seasons where you have more than enough volunteers, and then you go through seasons where you don't know where they all went. No matter what season you might be in right now, let's not forget that huge asset that you have. And I encourage you, if you haven't made contact with your group of volunteers, because I know you've been busy, uh, your life has been in, I don't want to say turmoil, but your life hasn't been normal the last, say, 7 weeks. I'd encourage you, pull that phone list out. Notice I said phone list, not email list. And I encourage you to take some time each day to call some of them, physically call them and touch base, see how they're doing. And you might even set a date next week where you could maybe pull them all in on a Zoom call for an hour and just kind of share your vision, share what's been going on, what you've been up to, what the church is up to, where things are going. But take that time calling them personally, see how they're doing. If they have any needs, pray for them. And then tell them about the get together that you're doing, invite them to that. and just recast your vision to that group. Get them excited. In fact, during this time, you may realize that some new positions could be opened up for volunteers that you didn't have before. Maybe some of them aren't working and they're at home, and they can help you with some stuff. So look at what areas they could assist you, and it gives them an opportunity to serve in new capacities in the church as well. So keep them plugged in, because when we do go back to quote normal, we want this group ready to get back. We don't want to be having to build up a team that fell apart because we didn't make contact for 10 weeks. Keep this group ready to go. And with my groups, I always would find the ones that are really social in your group, and I'd call them the social chairman, where every quarter they would find something fun for the group to go do. Find those people, do a game night on Zoom, keep that group connected and close. You don't necessarily have to be at all of those events, but just keep the group together and going. So
Yeah, at the end of the day, man, it really is about relationships. Ministry is influence,
mhm.
and people who are in positions of leadership are there, and they should be using that influence to help that momentum that you talked about, but then also to influence the others to stay in relationship. Because within relationship is an element of accountability, and just making sure that there are certain needs that get met by fellowship and by
Right.
that friendship aspect. And I think that's a great point, Dan. What about
And as the leader yourself in a church, it's so easy to get burnt out because you're never sitting listening to a message. I really encourage you to carve that time out, whether it's before anybody gets up at home, if you're a morning person, or at night. Spend 30 minutes reading the Bible, listening to a podcast. Do something to get your spirit man built up, because if you don't, over the course of a year or two, you can burn yourself out.
yeah.
And you forget why you're there and what you're really doing that for. I had to remind myself of that every few weeks,
Yeah.
because it's tough. It's tough work.
And it's difficult to, I know for myself, it's difficult to watch other services to say, well, I want to get something different. I want to, get something else, because I immediately jump into the role of being the guy who used to be the one who fact checked all of the stuff, and the the
Right.
guy who proofed all the videos, because then you start looking at the production value and you start getting all of that. It's very difficult to separate that from actually just getting spiritual nourishment for yourself. And sometimes I agree, like, step away from watching people on video, man. Just go
Do the audio.
do the audio.
I do audio for that very reason.
But even if, whatever your faith is,
Mhm.
obviously Christians believe in the Bible, Jews, the Torah, and so get into the document, the living document that your whole faith is based on, away
Mhm.
from the technology, so
Right.
that us as people who lead others can not have that as a hindrance to what we're seeing. So we talked about kind of the leadership aspect of helping volunteers out, guys and ladies under us. Let's go the opposite direction. Let's say I'm either a volunteer, which a lot of the people watching this are going to be volunteers. They just have a heart to help. Volunteers or managers. Let's go in the opposite direction. So we talked about what I can do for people under me.
Mhm.
What can we do for people above us in ministry? What would you tell someone who's a volunteer guy, he or she just wants to do their best? What would you tell them about going the other way to their leadership?
I would say don't wait for your supervisor, if that's your audio technical director, the media director. Don't wait for them to give you things to do. If you're wanting to get more involved, to learn more, be on their case about it. It's not that they're forgetting you, they're super busy. and they would love you to get more involved and to learn, whether it's even watching the mix, whether they're posting maybe the service online, they're remixing or doing something else. But be eager and take the first step. Don't wait for them to come to you. Sometimes they might, but in most cases, they're probably not because they're busy. But take that action step and be the first one to do it, and be available. If you see your supervisor is struggling, he's got a lot on his plate, ask him, what can I do to help you? Can I stay over after service? Can I coil cables? What can I do to help you? Be that servant. That means a ton to that person.
Yeah,
Trust me, it does.
for sure. I remember, my mind goes back to this guy who just showed up one day and said, I want to start running camera on the weekends. And he was terrible. I mean, he was terrible.
Yeah.
But he had the best attitude. And my editor at the time, he and I were talking about it, like, man, we got to find a place to plug this guy in, but he's just not getting it. But I said, we just have to give him every opportunity. So what we started doing was, when he had moments during the work week, we would just have him come and help us do stuff. And I mean, that guy, over the course, it took about 3 months, but over the course of time, being in a production environment, having my editor talk to him about what he was looking for in shots, like he would come with us on our little, we used to do sermon openers and sermon support pieces and
Yeah.
stuff. He would grip for us. Then he started lighting for us. He became our best camera operator. He became he became our de facto handheld guy. And I mean, his shots were great. Everyone else would kind of like be near the band or whatever. He would get up right in the drummer's face, all this stuff. But I mean, it was like he became great at what he did. And
now that you say that, I think every church I've worked at, there's been that one guy who had a lot of time on his hands. Whether I had one that was disabled, had a disability, but had a lot of time on his hands. So he wanted to be there for everything, and was eventually able to really develop a skill. And for him, it was actually audio mixing. And he was an amputee and had one arm, but was a great mixer.
Yeah.
And so it's so true.
Yeah, when we make ourselves available, and there's a guy I used to follow, a preacher guy by the name of Winky Pratney, and he used to talk about the FAT principle. God wants fat kids, faithful, accountable, and teachable. And if you're faithful, you're accountable, you take direction well, and you're teachable, you're moldable. Man, there's like nothing you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take it a step farther. What can we do for our pastors as church volunteers, specifically in the technical arts? What can we do for the guy in charge of that local body?
Your pastor has a ton on his mind right now. He's most likely under a lot of stress. If you think you're uncomfortable, multiply that by 10. And he's overseeing every department of that church financially. It weighs on his shoulders. And to support him, we can make sure that during tapings, we've double checked, triple checked every single microphone. Everything's working as smoothly as possible. Yes, stuff may still happen, but we've double checked, and we have contingency plans in place so that when he walks into that venue, number one, he can stay tuned in and focused on his message. He's not distracted by us doing sound checks when he wants to go. We've done everything in advance and made it very smooth for him to walk in and hear from God and convey that message to others. That would be one of the biggest things. This isn't the time to talk to him and give him your opinion on things. And trust me, he doesn't want to hear that right now. That's not the time and the place. But learn when to talk and when not to talk, when to speak and not speak. It's huge. Rich, what are some things that I'll turn the tables here slightly. What are some things that you found specifically from the audio world that helps, whether it's a pastor or whoever is going to be on camera, stay focused when they enter that room? Some do's and don'ts, maybe.
Yeah. So, the best audio guy is the one you don't have to think about. So in this new, mostly empty video venue world, I've talked to a lot of people around the country, and you know, every place is a little bit different. Some places have really brought the volume down and made it more of a conversational level thing. Some places have actually increased the volume to give it more of that live punch, but it's
Mhm.
all been about kind of, and it really, it kind of falls on the pastor's shoulders what he or she is really wanting to be able to, some guys, we worked for a guy for a number of years together who, he was semi-retired, but he would come and do television shows, and the big joke was that he wanted a lot of fold back in his monitor. He wanted to hear himself. There are some guys who are that way. They just feel with the audio around them that, that helps them relay their message. Other people are, if I don't have a big room, I don't want it to sound like a big booming thing. I think the main thing, aside from the technical side, I think the main thing that anyone can do, um, is just to respect that vision, and and cut them some slack. This is
Mhm.
scary times. I mean, you know, if you've got a staff, if a pastor has a staff of folks, and if giving has gone down, he and the board are already talking about cutbacks. They're going to start with budget things that don't affect people's livelihoods, but the conversations are being happening, or are happening, about what they're going to do if this doesn't return to normal giving. So that's an extra load that's happening on them. I think the more you can do, especially as a sound guy, without coming out and saying, "I took care of it, I took care of it." I think the more you can do to show him that you have taken care of it, that you are on board with the direction. Right now is not the time, as you said, Dan, to be offering your armchair quarterback views, especially when you're in that production environment. Maybe if there's a debrief and you've got the chance to speak to a situation, that's the time to do it. But in the context of like a ministry environment, just really, man, support, and and do what they need you to do for them to feel like they're succeeding at what they're doing. Um, and then just to reiterate what I said earlier, if you're doing broadcast mixing, make it sound as best as you can. Make it sound like what it looks like. And again, there are tons and tons and tons of tutorials online in both the video and the audio world about how to do a good broadcast. We have several videos that we've done from PreSonus employees about how to create a good broadcast mix, about how to take the mixer you have right now and make it a good broadcast mixer. And I've talked to several pastors who they're unhappy with the way they sound online, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, except that they just have never given it much thought until now. And I think the main thing, obviously the technical side is one thing, but the main thing really is to let them know that they have your support, and that you're working to make them look good on the air. And um, and if we can create a distraction free environment, whether it be in the room with folks or on television or online, you've done your job. So that's what I would say to that. um, well, I think we're probably about to wrap up here. Anything else that you would want to add to this, Dan?
Well, I think PreSonus has done an amazing job of having the gear ready for such a time as this. I mean, literally, I've heard uh, how you're one of the few companies that has stuff in stock, and you're really supporting the local church in this time, and that's huge. And that says a lot, because it shows they're going to be with you for the long term, right?
Yeah.
And Rich is a great guy. Church ministry, broadcast world really well, and I think this is a perfect fit. And take advantage of Rich and his mind and his knowledge. He's a wealth of information. I come to him with questions myself, so he's the guy.
Oh, man, I appreciate you saying that. And yes, I mean, obviously, the I didn't want to make this to be a big sales pitch thing, but certainly if you are needing to add to your sound system or whatever, I would love the opportunity to be able to speak with you. I feel like PreSonus is uniquely positioned to be a solution in so many different areas. Our mixers, can pull multiple sources from multiple places and route to multiple mixers, and we do that better than anybody else in our price point, in price points 2 or 3 times the ours. And so, yeah, if you want to just hit me up in the comments or send me a direct message, I would love the opportunity to chat with you. If you're watching this via YouTube, you can go to Facebook and request to be part of the PreSonus House of Worship group, and you can definitely be a part of that conversation there. Dan, I appreciate you so much for spending time with us, man. You're a guy I've always looked up to and just always respected your work. And thank you so much, man. I just appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, well, that wraps it up. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for hanging out with us today, and I hope that you were able to glean something and be encouraged, and just learn a little bit about just how to do this better and how to navigate this whole thing that we're all going through together. And we just want to be a resource for you and just be able to help you along the way. PreSonus wants to be the company that you look to. I want to be a guy that you look to for guidance and for help. So we appreciate you being with us today. See you next time.